So this is really exciting. We've got Jenny with us today. Jenny is a national minimum wage specialist, and you've had a long career in that particular specialism, haven't you? So what me and Jenny would like to do is go through some common questions and some case studies from employees on national minimum wage, because I think you'll be really surprised at how much employees obviously it affects. But you think it's a small subject, but it's not. It's absolutely huge, and it touches pretty much everything. So I'll let Jenny introduce herself, who she is, what she does, how you can get in contact, and then I'll start with the case study.
Okay, yeah. Well, the NMW geek here. How would you possibly think NMW could be so difficult? It should be really straightforward. It's just a rate based on age. That's what everyone thinks. And it isn't. As we chat through it today, you'll probably see lots of areas that you didn't realise hinged on minimum wage. So my career bit background, I started off in HMRC for many, many years and went into their national minimum wage team. And then I got really frustrated because as I was on that team, a lot of people that I was sitting in front of just were oblivious to the rules and regulations. So the more frustrated I got, I thought I needed to do something about it. So 10 years ago, I left that team to set up my own consultancy. But in the meantime, one of the big four found me and asked me to go to head up their accountancy firm for the national minimum wage, which is where I've been for the past 4 years, heading up their UK and I team for national minimum wage. And then again, about 6 months ago, I started getting itchy feet again, going, do you know what? A lot of large businesses that deal with the big four, I'm getting to them, but I couldn't get my knowledge out to the smaller and medium employers and to the workers. I want to help the workers understand what their rights are. So a couple of months ago, I set up my own consultancy firm, and here I am chatting to you. So hopefully be able to answer all your strange questions about the strange world of minimum wage.
Yeah, so on that note, if you are interested throughout this, definitely go and follow Jenny. Jenny, like she just said, is not only offering advice and support for employees, but also employers, businesses. She's got some resources over on her profile to help employees as well. And you're going to be surprised at how often your employer can fall foul of national minimum wage. And we're going to talk a little bit about what employees can do, and vice versa. By sharing this information, employers are going to find out how to protect themselves, but employees are also going to learn about their rights as well. So let me get my questions up. We were going to talk about, let's have a look. So in terms of HMRC, so when I spoke to you previously, I don't think many people are aware that HMRC actually go out and target businesses for enforcement.
No, they don't. It's probably one of those strange areas. You hear about it every now and again when it hits the media and you see the naming and shaming list of all these terribly rogue employers, as they're referred to. In my experience, they're not rogue. It is more to do with technicalities where employers are caught out with it. But HMRC have, for the past 20 odd years, been enforcing national minimum wage since it came in. The team split into proactive and reactive enforcement. So if you get something in the media that hits about minimum wage or modern slavery or anything like that, the NMW team at HMRC will actively go in. But they also do proactive things. So they'll have, at the moment, they've got a current campaign on where they're targeting certain areas of the UK. At the moment, I think they're in North and East London areas, and they will fire out all those lovely nudge letters to probably about 4,000 businesses in the area of all sizes, saying check your NMW. But at the same time, they're really quite sneaky. They send out about 40 or 50,000 communications to workers in the area. And in those communications, they're saying, do you know common reasons that you could be underpaid minimum wage? Working through your lunch? Have you picked up an email in an evening? Do you have to travel for work? And they give them a list with a lovely, handy, here's an online help form to complain if you think you're not being paid minimum wage. And so that feeds through. So the team itself in HMRC is getting quite slick, quite large. And it's also going to form part of this new Fair Work agency that's being developed and coming into fruition next year.
That's going to be really interesting. In terms of as an enforcement officer, if you're going to go into a business, you're in the premises, you're looking around. What are you looking for? Run me through maybe the top ones that you're looking for with staff.
Depends which sector you're going into. So if we hit retail to start with, I'll be going on the shop floor. My eyes straight away will go to feet. So we'll look at shoes to see, what is everyone wearing? Are they all wearing black shoes, black trousers? Is there a dress code policy going on here? Because that's one of the main hit areas. Because if there's a dress code policy for black shoes and your employer's not providing it and you have to buy the shoes, then the cost of that will reduce your minimum wage pay and has made thousands of people in hospitality and retail sector underpaid minimum wage. We'll look at clocking in and clocking out machines, or what devices an employer will use to monitor your actual working time. A lot of people use shift times, but actually shift times doesn't tell us the whole story of what working time is. You know, you might come in 10 minutes earlier because your employer demands you to come in 10 minutes earlier to be prepared, as they say. But that's all working time and therefore should be paid or embedded within your national minimum wage calculations. So there is so many different areas that we look at with hospitality and retail. Other sectors, I don't know if anyone wants to throw a sector out there. I'll say which risks are associated with each sector.
Tell us in the comments what area you work in, and Jenny can go through some risks with you. In terms of uniform, I want to understand how far this goes. So this was because we had an exchange beforehand where I sent you over like maybe some provisional questions. So an employer says to you, the dress code is such and such. Okay, maybe it's black shoes, maybe you've got to wear black clothes. That's fair enough. What you're saying is then those purchases, as they're a requirement for the business, they're going to take you under national minimum wage. If less than matching somebody's paid minimum wage, then they're potentially going to take you under. But how far does that go? Does that go into as far as an employer requesting you to be a professional appearance? Does it, in terms of whatever products you need to do that?
Okay, so one of the starting points when an investigation is opened, HMRC will ask HR for some documents, one being a contract, one being your staff handbook, and some being your policies. So we'll look at your dress code policy. And if in there it's quite prescriptive, so if it's saying, you need to wear a dark brown suit or a navy suit or something like that, then you're quite prescriptive. If it goes into, we need you to be in smart casual, then that won't necessarily reduce your minimum wage pay. It's depending how prescriptive the description of your dress code policy is.
Okay.
So black shoes, obviously straight away. We get non-slip, non-shiny, polished shoes. They have been caught out by HMRC. And sometimes if HR put it more in a reflective way, if you must wear sensible shoes that is not trainers, flip-flops, this, and so they'd say what is not, they can also make it too prescribed by saying what it isn't. So it's a really fine line of how dress code policies need to be addressed.
That's a hard one to judge.
It is. And which each compliance officer goes in, they might have a slightly different approach to it.
Yeah.
So it isn't just black and white with everyone.
It's very interesting. I'm sure a lot of people in the comments let's go back up and see if anybody's mentioned where they're working, what organisation they're in. Let's have a look. We've got a few just general employment questions. I'm not going to be answering those today, guys. We're just focusing on national minimum wage because we've got Jenny here from National Minimum Wage Specialists. Definitely drop a follow. Very useful information and very good videos on Jenny's page.
You've got the Children's Play Centre there. Chloe's mentioned about the Children's Play Centre. So children's play centres along with nurseries. They're normally top of HMR's hit list for common errors with minimum wage. Usual ones there are they've got a prescribed uniform. It could be they have to come in 10 minutes early to set the room up before they open the doors to everyone else and come in. And also with nurseries, you've got some staff who might work there and bring their own children. And this is a really tricky one. If they bring their own children to the nursery, they choose to, and they're offered a discount on the nursery fees, an employer will sometimes take that as a deduction. And that will reduce your minimum wage, strangely enough, if it's made as a deduction. So if you're paying £200 for your nursery fees, that £200 will come off your pay and often leads to people being underpaid minimum wage.
Wow. That's crazy, isn't it?
But if that same individual employee made a cash payment or did a bank transfer, then it won't reduce minimum wage. It's the sheer fact, it's the deduction that it's caught out.
Yeah, so in terms of deductions generally as well, some of them, so you've got your contract of employment, you'll have a section that's labelled deductions, and it will say, we reserve the right to deduct money from your wages in such and such events, and there's only a huge list of situations. But some of them, those deductions, you can take in their entirety from an employee's final pay, and some of them you can't, because you're going to be taking them under national minimum wage. So maybe you could talk a little bit about which ones are maybe the most common that you can't.
Okay, it does go back to whether you've got a contractual entitlement. So let's take a training clawback, for example. So if it's a requirement of your role to do some training, and it's quite expensive, the employer's paying for it, but it's a requirement, and you leave within a couple of years, they can't take you under minimum wage for that clawback, even if you have a contractual right to it, because it's a requirement of your role. So even if they say, we've got a contract, of course we can take it back. If it's a requirement of your job, they can't reduce it below minimum wage. Yeah, it's normally in that final pay reference period for the clawback that comes back. If, however, it's a voluntary course that you've asked to go on to further your own professional development, and they give you a contract to actually reduce it down and say, yeah, we'll claw it back, then you're okay. That can reduce NMW pay. But I have been involved in a number of cases where it's a voluntary role. They were not given any contract to sign about the clawback, and they reduced it down. But because there was no contractual agreement between them, they couldn't go below minimum wage. So you really need to look at the detail of what happens with the clawbacks on things for training.
So voluntary, potentially okay.
Yeah.
Business required, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
If you're an employer and you'll take it and you're taking that out of final pay.
It is.
Okay. So I've got my case studies up here of what we were going to talk about. Let's just have a quick look in the comments, see if there's any questions before we go on. Personally, the employer should provide uniform for all staff. Yes, I mean, there are a lot of places that don't provide uniform, aren't there? I mean, offices and etc.
Yeah. Another one with uniforms, sometimes they might provide them and it's expensive, and they sometimes take a deposit because the uniform's expensive. The deposit will reduce national minimum wage pay in that first pay period. So be aware that that will also do it. And again, at the end, when you leave and you have to take your uniform back, if you don't take the uniform back, if you've got a contractual agreement, it will reduce minimum wage. It won't reduce minimum wage pay. But if there's no agreement, it could reduce minimum wage pay. That devil is in the detail of what contract you've got with HR on the issues. So
just to nail that down completely. So if you've got an agreement, then you're okay. If you say, then you're okay to deduct. But if there's no agreement, that's the distinction.
Yeah, you need to have that agreement between you both so that the worker knows what they are meant to do at the end of the employment. Another thing with uniform at the end is if they bring it back and the employer thinks it's damaged, but actually it's just normal wear and tear, the wear and tear will not stand, and it will actually reduce minimum wage pay. So if it's just general wear and tear, you can't take them below minimum wage in that final pay period for it.
I see. We've got somebody on here, somebody said, as a TA, teaching assistant, I'm told I've got to go on residential with children, but I get no extra pay. Yeah.
The first thing with minimum wage, and we've not covered it yet, is these 4 work categories that minimum wage works from. And they're nothing to do with self-employed, direct or anything. It's whether you're an hourly paid worker, a salaried worker, output worker, who are those paid piece rate or per garment that they're actually making. And then if you don't fall into any of those 3, you fall into an unmeasured worker. And why it's critical to know what type of work category you're in is because that tells you what type of national minimum wage calculation you need to do. So if we go back to the TA, what work category? Now, I've seen TAs that are salaried, I've seen time work TAs, and I've seen unmeasured.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the work category, depends how their NMW calculation is included. All the excess working time should be included in each of the calculations, but it's the timing of when that work time should be included. So for the TA that asked there, go and find out first what work category you are. And from there, we can build up to understand if you've been underpaid and what that extra working time counts as.
And how would they do that? How would they find it? What work category they're in?
Well, you can look at your contract, but I go straight back to your employer and ask them the question, because they've got a legal responsibility to do national minimum wage calculations every time you're paid. And to do the calculations, they should know what type of work category. I say should because 90% of employers I go into and payroll look blank and going, I don't know, I just do it this way. But it starts with onboarding. It starts at HR. When they hand over that contract in implied terms, well, what work category are they? Because payroll needs to know so they can do the right calculations.
Mm-hmm. So if the employer doesn't know, could they contact HMRC? They could potentially contact ACAS maybe?
Yep, they can go direct there. They can ping me on TikTok. They can do whatever they like, and I can tell them what to look for. There's government guidance, but it is a little clunky to work through. So there's always the Gov site that you can go on to see where it is. In most cases, if your pay fluctuates, so you're paid per hour, you're normally a time worker.
Mm-hmm.
If your pay stays the same spread out over the 12 months, you're typically a salaried worker, unless, and there are a few things. So if you get regular commission, you won't be either of those. You will be automatically an unmeasured worker. So there's a few little nuances.
Mm-hmm. So you said that there's different calculations for each. Do you mean in terms of the pay reference periods, or how do you mean?
No, the pay reference period will be every time you're paid, so weekly, monthly, calendar month, whatever. But the actual NMW calculation, depending on the worker category, some things are in and some things are out, such as overtime premium payments do not count for minimum wage purposes. So even though you might have a pay slip that's quite healthy and you've got your normal basic pay for the week and your overtime and premium, a lot of that premium is stripped out for minimum wage purposes. Allowances don't count for minimum wage in some of the calculations. So it's knowing what your parameters are for the calculations to make sure they're correct.
I see. And in terms of recovering, if you think that you've been paid under national minimum wage, you currently are, you have in the past, what are the options for employees?
First of all, I go back to your employer straight away. It's the quickest and easiest way to actually query it with them. Explain to them why you think you're underpaid. If you're not getting anywhere with that, you do have some alternatives. You can go to ACAS, so you can call them up. HMRC have a direct online complaints form with a lovely digital assistant that can help you complete the online complaints form. And I will say, through experience, I know 100% of those complaints are reviewed by HMRC. When I was there, it was in 5 or 10 working days, because HMRC have a service level agreement with the Department of Business and Trade and Government that they will look at 100% of those. So the complaints will get looked at and often will spark an investigation, not just for the person who's complained, but it will go into the whole of the business in case anyone else has been affected.
Okay, and in terms of how long you can go back to recover payments?
6 years. It's massive. So HMRC investigation will go back as standard over 6 years. It used to be an exception. It's now not. It's the norm. So if you're currently with the same employer, you can raise a complaint. You can do it anonymously, or even someone else can do it on your behalf. So it can be done that way. If you've left the employer, you can still raise a complaint. You can still go through that same process. So have a look, have a think about it. If over the last 6 years you feel you've underpaid minimum wage, there's a route for you to check it out.
And we did talk briefly, didn't we, about what was best in terms of the employee's interest, whether it was better to go down the employment tribunal route. From my own experience, tribunals you're probably looking around about I don't know, it depends where you are in the country, but 18 months, maybe longer, maybe up to 2 years. But through HMRC, it's longer, isn't it? Potentially.
Yeah. So HMRC can, I mean, I've been involved in investigations that's gone on 6 years plus in some cases, depending on the size of the business. But HMRC will also take that to tribunal. So if HMRC work on your behalf, send it to the employer doesn't agree with the enforcement notice from HMRC, the employer can then say, I want to take it to tribunal, and HMRC will do that and take it on your behalf to tribunal.
The tribunal share information with HMRC. No.
They have perimeters of what they will share, but obviously you realise when you go to tribunal you've got the lovely big bundles of evidence and everything else that go over there, so it's all between them that they will share what evidence they've taken, not only from talking to the complaint worker, but during an investigation the compliance officer very early on talks to a sample number of current and former employees at the business to see if the same issue is happening that the complainant has talked about. And all that forms part of the evidence at the tribunal.
Yeah, somebody's just said that I'm echoing. I'm wondering why. So I'm going to turn my volume down. It might be that am I up loud on your end, Jenny?
I can hear you fine.
Is your volume of me turned up high? It might be that I'm echoing through you, if that makes sense.
No, I've got it about 30%.
Okay, we'll see how we get on. Hopefully it's not too bad and it's bearable. Let me know. Somebody said we've got general queries here. I'm not answering general queries today, guys. This is anything related to national minimum wage. Let's go up. Right, okay, good. No more echo. Thank you. Right then, let's have a look at some case studies. So, somebody asked, they work for an employer who's also their private landlord. Do you see any concerns regarding national minimum wage in those situations?
Huge. Red flag, big red flag. Unless, and I'll say first of all, if it's social housing, obviously if you work for a council and you've got a council house, that's excluded. And also universities and higher education. If you are working at the student union and you've also got student digs there with them, they're excluded. But anyone else, if you rent living accommodation from your employer or anyone associated with your employer, and that's where it gets quite wide. So if your employer's got a board of directors and it's one of their directors,
right,
it doesn't have to be it's a requirement of your job. It might just be your employer goes, I've got a portfolio of properties here. If you want one of mine, you can rent it. What that means is any rent that you pay, not just a deduction, so any direct debit, any cash payment that you pay your rent, and it's more than £10.66 a day, which works out about £320 or whatever a month. Anything greater than that will reduce your national minimum wage pay. Now, how can you rent anywhere for £330? If you can find me one, let me know, please. If you think of normal rent in the UK at the moment, it's probably an average is about £1,200 to £1,500 a month. So you will be taking £1,000, which is the top up above that £300, off someone's pay. And it's in the regulations. It's one of those real quirks of the trade. And some of the cases I've been involved in have been really sad. They've been retailers who've rented out, above the shop to help out their employee. And in the end, the employer, the only way out of it is to actually say to the worker, you're evicted, you can't stay here anymore because I can't keep reducing and topping up your salary by that £1,000. It's ridiculous. That's the legislation.
I'm thinking pub landlords, somebody who works in a pub and lives upstairs.
Yeah, and that's a requirement of the role as well. So have a look at how much rent you're paying. And if it's anything more than that £10.66 accommodation offset, then you've got to take that into account. And then you've also got utility bills on top of that. So if you are responsible for your own utility bills, that's fine. But if your employer pays them no matter what and you pay your employer back, then the utility bills will also reduce minimum wage pay on top of your rent.
Someone said this is crazy. I think that's crazy too. Do you think that needs to change? Do you think that's
I do think that is the cases I've been involved with. They are not being an exploitative employer or landlord by letting an employee stay there. It is ridiculous. It does, in my opinion, need looking at in a lot more detail.
Okay, very informative. I'm echoing again, aren't I? I can hear it. Let me just try and turn myself down a tiny bit. We've answered the nursery one. Kind of. Someone says they work at a nursery and their child attends the same nursery. Do you see any concerns regarding minimum wage for that? Is there anything else?
Yeah, it's if they make a deduction for the fees, even if it's a reduced fee. The sheer fact and the reason and the logic behind it is because the money is going back to the employer for their own use and benefit, and it's caught under Regulation 12. So it's a slam dunk, unfortunately.
It's the same as renting, isn't it? It's a crazy one.
I mean, the strange thing in a case like that, you get the childminder at the nursery. She leaves after 3 or 4 years, makes a complaint, and in effect, she's going to get all the nursery fees back. So, because if you've paid close to minimum wage and they go back 6 years, they can claim it back.
I know that there's going to be. Well, we've got Danny on here, who is the nursery survivor account. She's got a lot of followers, nursery-related followers. I think they're going to be drawing inspiration from this.
I think I've linked in with Danny, and I did a stitch with one of her videos before about it, and yeah, it is one of those areas.
Okay, next one. We've already talked about the training repayment, so I'll skip that one. We've done deductions. So an employee has a company van. They're a plumber. They have to commute to different workplaces each day. Is the commute to and from work payable in terms of minimum wage?
Go back again to your contract. So do you have a place of work that's located within your contract? So if it's an office somewhere close to you, or are you a peripatetic worker? Are you a worker that actually works from home? If you are totally working from home, then your first commute of the day, it's all working time, and that will count for minimum wage. It doesn't matter if you're stuck on the motorway somewhere, it's all working time. If, however, you do have a place of work, then that first commute of the day does not count as working time. So it's looking at the detail of what's included in that contract, which I'm sure you see a lot of, Amy.
Yeah, that's a common one that we get asked, to be honest, because a lot of trades and they want to know, whether they need to pay for their first trip to site and things like that. And it also depends, not necessarily in terms of minimum wage, or maybe it conflicts, but working time just generally. So we've got working time in terms of national minimum wage, and we've got working time in terms of the working time regulations. So in terms of working time regulations, it comes under control then. What work are they expected to do and things like that during that time? We've talked on it a little bit. Can you explain the different calculations in reference to hourly paid, salaried and salaried commission? We did talk about that a little bit, and you did say that people can get in contact with you. Are you happy for people to get in contact if they want to query that?
Takes me a little while. Send them through the DMs. I'll plough through them all and I'll get through to have a look. And if I can't figure it out, I'll tell you who do you need to go to figure it out.
That's really great, guys. I mean, I would definitely, if you want to seek some advice on that, get in contact and make sure you're following, because that's an incredible service that's being offered, and very, very worthwhile, especially as we talked about 6 years of essentially back pay. Next up, we've got apprentices. What are the most common breaches that you see with apprentices?
The most common one happens at this time of year, to be honest. It's they leave school, they decide to do apprentice, an employer takes them on, but they don't start their actual apprenticeship till probably September, October, when the colleges kick off. And at that point, they then sign that agreement, that tripartite agreement between apprentice, trainer, and the employer. And actually, legally, from NMW purposes, you can't be apprentice till you've signed that agreement and start that training. So you get from June, when they leave school, through to September, where they should be paid per their age and not as an apprentice. So it's a really easy hit for them to look when HMRC come in to see if there's any issues around that.
That's a really interesting one. Again, I can see HMRC are going to be busy after this goes out, because I'm going to be sharing this on my page, and Jenny also. I think you're going to be sharing some as well. I mean, yeah, maybe potentially some angry employers with us, but like I said earlier, sharing this information is preventative information for employers as well. So if you do need advice on what measures you need to put in place, Jenny, I suppose you do assessments for employers, do you?
Yeah, literally in the consulting. So I do educational workshops, virtual workshops, I do assessments. I can look at those documents, those 3-tier documents that HMRC will ask for, is to have staff handbook, contract and policies, because they will be absolutely full of NMW red flags.
Yeah, and you can pick those up for businesses money in the long term. Right, okay, let's go to the next case study. We've got an employee who's been offered a job at a local cafe. We've covered this one because I wanted to know how far it went in terms of having to be presentable and clean. I went to an extreme and I basically said, does it cover things like hairbands if they ask you to tie your hair back?
You know what, it could do. So if I put my old HMRC hat on and I look at some policies I've seen where the girls are said they must have their hair tied in a bun, they must wear makeup, if it becomes a requirement of that role, it could very well be argued that that is all a requirement that you need to purchase.
Would HMRC require receipts?
No,
going back?
Not for NMW. No, they literally will make their best judgment on things, because not everyone obviously keeps the cost of shoes or makeup or whatever is going on for the past 6 years. They have won employment tribunals on best judgment before now, and they do work out the last 6 years. They will work out what the cost of a pair of shoes is. They'll look at 3 retailers going from Primark to a supermarket up to maybe Next or something like that, and they take the average. So no, receipts are not required.
I'm also thinking about the requirement to be clean shaven.
Yeah. Well, if you're not normally shaved, if it's a health and safety one, maybe that would overrule it. Okay. But any requirement, I'll tell you some of the quirky ones that I've seen. So we've got chefs. Chefs actually are quite precious about their tools and equipment, such as chef's knives. And it's common practice actually in hospitality for chefs to take their own set of knives wherever they go. So a lot of hospitality firms do not provide the chef's knives. Now that then becomes a requirement of the role. So every time they need to buy a knife, which I believe can be really quite expensive, the cost of buying that knife, again, will reduce your minimum wage pay. The sheer fact he can't be a chef without his knife, he can't work without it, and the employer's not providing it. We see it with mechanics and the mechanic tools. It can also be really quite expensive, the mechanics toolboxes, where they take that toolkit with them. If they need to replace anything in there and the employer doesn't have the right spanner or whatever, then that will reduce minimum wage pay.
Okay, so you've got a mechanic. He's paid national minimum wage. He starts at somewhere new. They say to him, you've got to bring your own tools. Is it just at the point of replacement then?
Yeah, if you arrive there with your black shoes or with your toolbox, then you've got them already. It's only when you need to replace them that starts kicking in.
Okay. And you mentioned health and safety overruling. So if there's a health and safety requirement for something, does that overrule in terms of the calculation then?
Yeah, statutory requirements will normally overrule it in a case like that. So if they're saying for whatever reason they have to be totally clean shaven, then I would take that. And I have not seen many NMW cases reflecting on that risk.
Okay. Very good information. The next one is on workers on call. This is a very complicated subject. Basically, I wondered if you could tell me about concerns with workers who are on call. So we've got an example, a professional who works 9 to 5, but who's required to be on call during the evening and through the night.
Okay, it is a tricky one. So if we look at the normal on-call situations, if it's quite relaxed and you must, you're paid a certain amount of a fee for being on call, that will count for minimum wage. But we also look at the criteria involved in the restricted criteria about you being on call. So if you just have to answer the telephone and deal with the emergency as and when it happens, then the working time will kick in from when you get that call. I have had cases where they have to be within 10 minutes of a location, of an office location. And that is really quite restricted. If you're on call all weekend and you've got to be that close, that could be considered waiting to work time, on call time, and the whole of it could be counted as working time. I have seen cases where businesses have said, you know, you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to take drugs or whatever like that, so restricting you down again. However, in isolation, that alone won't mean that it's all working time for being on call. It's looking at the whole picture of it, like you said earlier, Amy.
Yeah, so the restriction, you know, one example that comes to mind is a firefighter that I know from experience, they have to be situated or live in probably around about 10 minutes maximum from the fire station to be backup staff, you know, of which they're paid. So, yeah, and, you know, from my own work, we base, you know, in terms of designing the contracts, in terms of how much control and how much restriction there is, you know, is obviously going to vary greatly in terms of pay, like you say. Right, so on that one as well, I just had a thought that came to mind, and it's one that I mentioned to you, but I didn't put it in our questions. If an employer is contacting an employee outside of working time by phone, email, whatever, does that count as working time from the national minimum wage?
Strictly, yes, it does.
Okay.
You should, from when you actually leave work, you should be able to not do anything at all with work, not checking staff rotas, not doing anything, not WhatsApp groups. All of that can count and does count as working time.
And how would it interfere if you might get somebody saying, well, you know, you shouldn't answer the call? I mean, how does it need to be the fact that you're engaging with them? You are actually then working, so you answer the call. So when we're talking about WhatsApp messages, the fact that they're coming through, is it just at the point where you're engaging? Do you see what I mean?
To be honest, HMRC will go down to the minute on many things. So when you press answer that call and you know it's working time.
Very interesting. Oh gosh, I can literally just see employees' brains going calculating left, right, and centre.
Yeah, and it's not just time workers, it is salaried employees that are really being underpaid at the moment that I'm seeing, because the way you do a salaried calculation is not normally how you or I probably think salaried calculations are looking at. You'd look at someone on 30,000 and then look at how many hours they're doing and go, oh, it works out okay. But that's not how a salary calculation works. It looks at how many annual hours you're meant to work. So they'll go again back to the contract. If you're contracted 40 hours a week, that's 2,080 hours a year. So the calculation will then look at when during a whole calculation year that worker has achieved their contracted hours. So it might happen around month 10 or month 11 of your calculation year because you're doing excess unpaid hours during that calculation year. And all of a sudden you've got a real NMW risk in month 11 or 12 of your calculation year. And the example I use here, a bit of modelling and to bring it into life a little bit, if you are a salaried employee and you do 1 hour extra a day across the year, now that could be an extra half hour working through your lunch, evening, weekend, everything we've just discussed on working time there. Over the space of a year, that will lead to someone on £51,000 a year being underpaid minimum wage. And that's base salary. That's not with any salary sacrifice, pensions or anything else. That's base salary. And we are seeing HMRC enforce this now. In fact, last year, there were more people who were salaried being underpaid minimum wage than time workers.
And that's purely down to how the calculation is processed.
It is purely, it's a totally different format than most businesses realise how they need to calculate it. Plus also, they rely heavily on the contract to go, well, in the contract it says 40 hours a week, but you've got that lovely little clause that says, or as and when the business requires you to do extra. So an employer then can't demonstrate how many actual hours they've worked. You don't have the mechanism to do it. So HMRC have to find their evidence elsewhere.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy. on the annual hours. The next question, excuse me. So we've got a teacher who works term time only, wants to split their salary equally throughout the year. We see that one quite a lot. So they know exactly what amount they're getting regularly, even though during some months they're not working. Will the other months, when they're working, take them under national minimum wage?
I'll go back and you'll hear me repeat it a lot. What work category are you? If you are salaried, then it will allow us to look at the excess working hours over the year and we can work it out. If, however, you are an unmeasured worker, then it's every pay period we look at in isolation. So if we're looking at one period where there've been no holidays and they've worked there and they've done excess hours, then they could very well be underpaid in that period. And there isn't anything in legislation to allow you to go, oh, you've been underpaid then, but actually next month you're not, you're fine, you're overpaid. It is in that particular pay period. So it's really important to know what is the work category.
Yeah, and you know, I'll be honest, when I spoke to you, you asked me in your contracts of employment, do you put the different categories of worker? And I said no. And I haven't seen that anywhere. I haven't seen that.
One HR firm that actually looks at it at all. And it's fundamental to getting NMW correct.
Yeah. And we spoke about the fact that, you know, people perceive it to be a payroll issue, but actually, you know, when HR or whoever it is, business owners are designing these contracts of employment, they need to know. They need to know how these calculations are going to be done to make sure that they're not going to be forfeiting that. So yeah, this is huge news to me from speaking to you as well, as I expect it's going to be for the majority of people in my profession, even more so those employees and business owners who are unfamiliar. But I mean, I've come to the end of the questions. Let's have a look in the comments and see if we've got anybody who's got any questions. The nursery survivor says, I make some skits on this all the time. Tell them to raid nurseries. Yeah, I can imagine there's going to be a lot of employees going away and questioning whether they are now paid under national minimum wage as a result of this conversation. And also, like I said, as employers as well, a little bit scared now at the prospect because, like you said, HMRC actively target employers because the purpose from HMRC is that they impose fines, don't they?
Yeah, and they're huge fines. They're one of the largest fines around. So, as I say, they'll go back over a 6-year period and they'll work out all the workers and how their arrears are. And whatever the arrears are, the employer is fined 200%.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So I've seen some eye-watering figures of employers that are actually being penalised for this. If you look at the last naming and shaming list that came out a few weeks ago, £7.4 million just from 500 employers that were named and shamed. And it's huge.
Can an employer find out where HMRC are, where they're going, anything like that? No, they've got no idea.
They do give few of us the heads up as to which regions they're going into. However, because I am the NMW geek, I read lots of background reports that have come out, and I look a lot at the Low Pay Commission, and the Low Pay Commission normally indicates where they feel from the evidence they've gathered there's some NMW risks. It's normally around sectors. Education is always on there, and I really do think education is going to be an area that they will look into. They also split it by regions, and strangely enough, the compliance geographical approach that HMRC are using does actually mirror the Low Pay Commission report from last year as to which regions they are. So if you're in the know, you know where to have a guess at and see where they're going to target next.
But in terms of education, you know, education authorities, we're talking about, you know, unless you're talking about private, we're talking about taxpayer funded. So presumably, it's all one big pot that's going. It's all one big pot that's going right.
You would think that, and you would think HMRC wouldn't go in and enforce it under another government department, and they will, because the National Minimum Wage team is, even though they are enforcing it with the government, the arrears don't belong to them. The arrears are belonging to each individual worker, And therefore, if they get a complaint from wherever, and I've seen other government departments be involved in this, they will go in and enforce under it and issue penalties. They are not exempt from it.
Yeah, up to 200%, wasn't it?
It is 200%. It's
It is
fixed.
200%.
The only way it'll remove from that 200% is when HMRC have given the enforcement notice over to the employer. If they pay all the arrears and penalties within 28 days, then that penalty is reduced to 100%. But it's not like normal tax. Normal tax, if you get a penalty, it depends how well you worked with HMRC and you got off this for good behaviour, etc., etc. NMW is not like that. It starts off 200%.
It's a lot of money. And I mean, it's within their best interest to go over and leave no stone unturned, I guess.
It is. I mean, and they are very savvy with it. They're using a lot of AI. They're using a lot of data analytics. So where we were talking about earlier, how can you work out if an employer doesn't keep time and attendance records? How do HMRC find it out? Well, they'll talk to workers, which is one of the first points, but they'll also look at such things as laptop data. So they often take that as standard during investigation. They'll see what time Amy logged on in the morning and when she logged out, and that will be their starting point of what their working day is. And the sheer fact is it's the business, the employer owns that laptop, so they have access to the data and they should be looking at the hours people are working, is what HMRC say. So the burden of proof is always on the employer to find out the exact information. And normally they don't know this until they get an investigation or they hear one of these messages from you and I, like today.
Well, I mean, in that situation, quite a lot of the time, you're not actually aware of how much work somebody's doing. Quite often people will do extra work at home, more so than they need to, just to keep up. There's a lot of work on things. The employer might be completely unaware as to what they're doing, but as you said, it's their responsibility.
I mean, you say that, are they unaware or are they turning a blind eye to it? So if you've worked in teams, you know who your workhorse is, you get emails through and you get it through on a Sunday evening, do you not have a chat with them and go, are you struggling with some work? What's going on? Why are you working in evenings, a weekend? So really, it is a tricky area.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going through loads of situations in my head. I'm thinking about just general emails outside of work, during, and let's say you've just taken somebody on and you've got a lot of emails going back and forth, or you've got a couple of things going on, somebody sending these emails outside of work time. Does it relate to the time that they're taking to prepare the grievance, things like that? And let's have a look at some questions. If there's any related. My employers told us we have to do at least 1 week of overtime in the winter unpaid. So from my perspective, I'd be asking you to look at the contract of employment to see if they've got any flexibility in terms of your hours and what you need to work. And then I suppose from Jenny's perspective, Jenny's probably going to go back to the calculations and
which work category are you? If you're a time worker and you're doing an extra week, then you've got an extra week of working time that needs to be factored into that calculation.
Yeah. Let's go down. I work from home. Contractors should travel to another place, be compensated outside of normal hours. So if they're working outside of the contracted hours, should that travel to another place be compensated? I think we maybe need some more detail on that one, but you've already covered that, haven't you?
Yeah, normally if it's between two sites or two offices, that is considered business travel and therefore will count as working time.
Yeah. Let's go down. Not all my work is undertaken on the company equipment. I'm a contractor. I work in care. I'm contracted 25 hours, 7:30. But I've got to be available till 3 o'clock. Is that correct? I only get paid for 5 hours. And then basically that comes down to what we were talking about earlier as to whether what you're doing during that time. I mean, what is available? What are your requirements in terms of availability?
Exactly. So where are you till 3 o'clock? Do you have to stay on site until 3 o'clock? If so, then that's waiting to work and that is working time and it will be counted accordingly. If you're not and you're allowed to go home and you just have to be on call for it, then it goes on to the on-call issue.
Yeah. I think we're at the end of the questions on the live, and I'm at the end of the questions on here, and I'm aware that we've gone over our time because I was downstairs watching Lewis Capaldi. I'm so sorry, Jenny, honestly.
That's okay. You can go back and finish him off now.
I gotta go do the scoring in a minute, but she said I'm at home, but they say I'm not on call. Not on call, but required to be available.
Yeah. Normally you'll get an on-call payment for that, for being on call at the end of the phone. And for NMW purposes, working time will kick in from when they call you.
Yeah, so I know some as well that, you know, there won't be any on-call payment, but like you said, they will be paid if the phone rings, if they have to answer the phone. It's not a great way of working, is it? I mean, it's a horrible way to work, constantly on edge, not knowing if you're going to be needed, and also not compensated for it as well. She said she works in care. If they call you, you're on call. Somebody said, yeah, okay. Right, anything else that you want to add, Jenny?
No, I think we've covered an awful lot in that short time. We've probably blown
really
everyone's mind.
You are a fountain of knowledge, and I wish I had access to your brain, to be honest. But thank you so much for taking the time to answer some of those questions. Like I said, if anybody's watching, an employer, an employee, if you want some advice on maybe on national minimum wage, whether you think that you might be underpaid, whether you're an employer, you want to check your processes, prevent issues in the future, get in contact with Jenny. Make sure you're following her profile. There should be somewhere on the screen where you'll be able to follow her. I'm not as TikTok savvy as I should be, being on TikTok, but I'm sure that you guys know how to do it anyway. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and I'll be posting these videos out, so make sure that if you've got any more questions, you can comment on the videos.
Yeah, brilliant. And if anyone's got any more ideas, they want us to cover something another day, then let us know and we'll do the same again.
Absolutely. All right, thank you everybody for taking part and for your questions and for watching. I hope it was useful. I found it absolutely fascinating. So Two Funny Paws said a tick by her name. There we go. That's how you can follow. All right, guys, and remember, 6 years. 6 years goes back, so it's a hefty one potentially. Okay, take care, Jenny. Have a nice afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
I'll speak to you privately. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.